Welcome back. I'm Deborah Kaufman with Broadcast Beat, and we are broadcasting live from the show floor of the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers annual conference and exhibition. I have with me today Eric Norrell, who is the Field Systems Engineer for AJA.
Yeah.
Sounds like a cool job. Are you in the field all the time?
A lot of the time. I do work out of our headquarters up in Grass Valley, but I get to go all around the world, sell and plug stuff in, try to make stuff work, solve the problems.
Sounds like fun. So I understand that one of the things that you're running around resolving for people is HDR.
Yeah.
So what are the challenges that you as a field engineer and AJA are seeing in broadcast and OTT workflows?
Well, there's a lot of different issues. I mean, one of our newer products, our FS-HDR, we announced at NAB, and we brought that to the show thinking everyone's ready for 4K HDR, which
Right.
a lot of people are. There's a ton of that happening. But the thing we took away from that show is how much HD HDR exists out there. I mean, as you know, everyone has HD infrastructure, even
Right.
if they're doing 4K. And the cool thing about HDR, using the same amount of data when delivering the video as SDR, it's really just telling it what colors to show on the monitor. So we've seen a lot of things where in a live event space where they may be serving a couple of big jumbotrons that are HDR, but most of the facility, there's monitors all around the venue that are SDR, so they need a box that can do multiple things. And so the cool thing about a couple of our boxes is they can do multi-channel HD or single-channel 4K. So we've seen that really go in directions we weren't expecting when you bring a product to market and you think everyone wants to do this. And they do want to do that, that's great, but they want to do all this other stuff too. So it's been fun.
Isn't that typical? I'm sure you've seen that again and again as an engineer. You know, a company creates a product and then the customers reinvent it in some way.
Oh, almost every time. And obviously what people are buying it and using it for, that's what the product's for, not what you thought when you wrote up a design for it.
Well, what are people doing with it? How are they using it?
Well, that's what we've seen, a ton of people doing mobile production, and reality TV, all sorts of multi-channel HD, whether up, down, cross-converting, maybe it's a log signal or a Rec 709, or they have an HDR signal and they need to take it to SDR for whatever delivery mechanism. Now that you know, everyone's doing both HD and 4K, they're both doing SDR and HDR, so there's basically 4 different things happening in a lot of these productions.
Wow.
Whereas a few years ago there would be 1 or 2 maybe with different language tracks. Now all of that plus all the different color and gamut.
That sounds really, A, complicated, and B, that there might be some bumps in the road.
There definitely are some bumps in the road, and that's been one of the cool things we've seen at SMPTE this week is people actually are doing it now and they need solutions, and SMPTE's ratifying some standards that are really helping on the metadata side and some of the other things to simplify and sort of make it more automagical or whatever.
Automagical, I like that. So what are the SMPTE standards that are passing that are going to help?
We're looking for the dynamic metadata over SDI. Because right now, your home television, it knows what's coming over your HDMI connection. It'll pop into HLG mode or HDR10 mode, and it looks beautiful. In the broadcast side, SDI doesn't have those handles quite yet, so they're very close to kind of ratifying those standards so that we can make it a little bit simpler now. It's easy with our stuff, you tell it what's coming in, what do you want it to be, and it makes it happen, but soon you won't even need to tell it what's coming in, it'll just tell it what you want it to be.
Well, doesn't the evolution to an IP network mean that we eventually won't need those SDI connections?
Yeah, and that's the other thing that's a big part of SMPTE. We've seen, you know, 3D became a technology, 4K became a technology, IP, been nibbling around the edges for a long time, and that's really coming to a head too. It's we're seeing that HD workflows rolling out with a couple of the SMPTE standards, the 2110 stuff, the 22-6 and 7. There's some J2K stuff. So we're really starting to see that take off too across our product lines.
So what are you seeing? Is AJA seeing any issues that they feel that you're either tweaking your own software or creating new software or new products to address?
Well, that's the cool thing. The way we play in IP, we make a lot of little gray converter boxes that do signal transforms and conversions, but we've also have one of our Kona cards, which is a capture card. So someone could be sitting editing in Media Composer or Adobe or whatever. They don't even know they have IP video going in and out. It looks the same for their experience. And we're seeing a lot of that both in the retail post environment and with a lot of our OEM customers. They buy a card and they build a server. So all these broadcast servers, you can take in SDI, push out IP, take in IP, push out SDI or HDMI, or a lot of these other different standards as well.
Well, that's good to know. Now, I understand that you've, tell me a little bit about Thunderbolt 3. I understand you've had some news around Thunderbolt 3 recently.
Yeah, and that's one of our new exciting products we just announced about a month ago at the IBC show. We have two Thunderbolt 3 products coming down the pipe. The first one is our IO 4K Plus, which our IO products were one of the first Thunderbolt 1 devices, and this is kind of the evolution from there. But it's great to be able to add in a portable form factor, 12 gig HDMI 2.0, which HDMI 2.0 is one of the big drivers of HDR playout and capture, and be able to do everything over single link, quad link, whatever format you're using HDR in or 4K. And it's really a nice little box.
Oh, that's good to hear. So I know that you think that this is something that post-production people really should pay attention to. I mean, what are their reasons? What would their reasons be for upgrading to it?
Well, upgrading to this really will get you, like our old box is a great box. It's a little limited on the HDMI being a 1.4 connection, so if you are working in 4K and you need higher frame rate things, it's nice to have the real HDMI 2.0. But it's really nice because if you've been using one of our other products, you just plug it in, it uses the same drivers. There's no relearning, reinstall, hours of IT, it's just plug it in and use a new connector.
All right, and it's a product that's available now?
It will be shipping very soon, end of this month.
All right, and what kind of interest have you seen around it?
We've seen a ton of interest. I mean, we've partnered with Apple for a very long time, and as we've seen Thunderbolt and Intel sort of proliferate across HP and other PC manufacturers, we've just seen a lot of things that used to take a rack mount server type computer that you can do on a laptop in the field now. So you can go shoot all day and then edit from the same computer while you're in the field. And we see a lot of different people just putting them in rack infrastructures and in edit bays and things like that too. But it's really kind of cool to see a product that can work in Adobe Premiere and Avid Media Composer, and then also in an application like Wirecast or vMix doing multi-channel live streaming production stuff as well.
It sounds like a very, very versatile
yeah, the cool thing about our SDK is we support Mac, Windows, and Linux, so whatever our developer partners are building their application to work on, we can be there with them and have those tools.
And so when you go out and help people, is this a plug and play kind of thing, or do you need to go and help them really?
It depends. Our OEMs, they actually take our drivers for more of an elementary level and build them into their application. But then there's a lot of people like Adobe, we build a plugin that will play through the Adobe infrastructure. Or for Media Composer and those kind of things. So it depends on the application, but there are hundreds of retail applications that support our I/O infrastructure.
So that makes it very complicated for you, right?
Always. It's always something new.
What aspects of the media and entertainment business do you think is there one particular element in the media and entertainment business that really wants this product? Or is it really all over the map?
It's all over the map. I mean, in the post-production, we just see a ton of high-end color. We partnered very closely with companies like Colorfront, who are kind of part of the engine behind our FSHDR I was talking about. But they also do a lot of the very high-end post and use our cards for capture and playout. So when they're mastering and doing high-end color for cinema and television, it really looks awesome playing out.
Cool. So you debuted this at IBC. Does this mean there's going to be something else that's going to debut at NAB this year?
I think we will probably have some iterative stuff. The nice thing about AJA is we make a lot of different converters. So as new standards come out, either we can add it to an existing product or build a new connector version. But I think we will continue to see a rapid evolution of this stuff, and as HDR standards are ratified and as some of the metadata stuff I was alluding to starts to happen, it just becomes quicker and simpler for the customers, and that's what we all want, is our customers to focus on what they're doing in production, not worrying about some technical side project.
Well, probably nobody, you're closest to the customer, I imagine, because you're there in their facilities. What are you hearing from customers? What do they need? What do they want?
Well, that's the thing about HDR that's really taken off, and I think in a different way, whereas 3D sort of came and went. It still exists in a lot of cool places. It's a great technology, but we've seen HDR kind of by storm, since you can use the same 3 gig or the same HDMI connector over SDI or HDMI, and it's just flagging what colors and black and white levels to play. We've seen that really take off because you don't need to buy more bandwidth. That's always the problem when you go from SD to HD or HD to 4K. Suddenly it's 4 times the bandwidth I have to buy to distribute my signals. So then we learn compression and all these other ways of doing it. This is beautiful uncompressed footage that now looks better. So the color space of our cameras has always been here. We've been crunching it down for SDR, and now we can get a pretty nice medium, and there's a few standards that really do give us all the colors that we want to enjoy.
Well, with HDR, we've got the issue that there's more than one version, more than one flavor of HDR. How does AJA handle that?
That one's tough, and that's because a couple of the standards, HDR 10 Plus, which looks great, and Dolby Vision, which looks incredible, those use dynamic metadata. So if I play like a 4K file off of my Apple TV or off of my 4K Blu-ray, that data can be read by the TV dynamically. So this scene can be this level of brightness, this scene can be that level of brightness. That's part of the trick right now in broadcast television, is that we don't have dynamic handles. So we can be HDR and it can all look better, and that's where the dynamic metadata will allow us to do that scene-by-scene stuff for broadcasters as well.
Well, I suppose that's to protect our eyes as well, correct?
Yeah. Well, now, everyone used to say you'll sit too close to the TV and ruin your eyes. Maybe that might become a reality if we keep making the screens brighter and brighter.
Yeah.
But I love HDR because it's really a technology that anyone, industry or not, can instantly say, that looks better.
Yes.
And that's actually one of our demos. We go from SDR to HDR, and you see all the colors pop and the black and white levels go. And it really is, it's like, that looked amazing. I didn't even realize it could look better. And that's something a lot of people are seeing.
And many people are saying it's really more important than resolution.
No, I think so.
That?
And that's where we've seen the HD stuff really take off. Because everyone's got the infrastructure ready, and the monitors are less expensive, obviously, in that. So a lot of tiers of production are jumping on HD HDR as sort of a stepping stone, even if they haven't gone to 4K in a lot of their areas.
So this sounds like something we're going to be continuing to see more and more of as time goes on.
I think HDR is going to have its own evolution as raster sizes and frame rates change. I think the color space will kind of evolve on a parallel path.
Great, I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about multi-channel HD recording. That's a whole other topic here.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about it and how AJA is involved.
Totally. Well, we have our popular Key Pro recorders, which we're about 10 years into making those. And our most recent iteration, the Key Pro Ultra Plus, it's a nice, it's a half rack width, has a nice HD monitor on the front. And it's an iteration of our Key Pro Ultra, which looks almost identical, but it has some different hardware inside. So in the new Ultra Plus, we can actually take 4 channels of HD capture in one box. So in any production environment these days, we don't have room to put a bunch of monitors, a bunch of recorders. We need a monitor and recording. We need to save our real estate there. So we've seen a lot of staging production, a ton of reality TV. They were just recording so much material, and they need to be able to quickly capture that, monitor that, and have it in high quality ProRes or DNX.
Right, I was going to ask you what the application uses are, so I could see reality TV. What was the other example?
A lot of like AV staging and things where conferences where there's a lot of cams, so you can do all your ISO cords through one recorder and then push it out to your switcher for production.
Sports?
We've seen a ton in sports. I mean, there's all those stadium feeds that they are not always on air, but they record all of that for coaches' cams, for all that kind of stuff too. So we've seen a lot of stuff that never gets to air, but they still need high quality stuff they can go backwards and forwards and play through a replay system that they're already using. And it's nice to be able to slide one of these in there.
So I imagine these are in trucks as well.
Oh yeah, we sell a lot of trucks, and I've been joking because we sell a little rack shelf. And I'm always like, we never show the rack shelf, we just put the thing like, no, we got to show the rack shelf. and then a lot of light bulbs go on when they see that. It's not just a tabletop recorder playout device. It really is an all-in-one 4K high frame rate or multi-channel HD box.
And what changes are you seeing in this? Is this something that's getting bigger and bigger, or are there more and more uses for
We've
it?
just seen, I think people can now afford to add more cameras, whereas, when I was talking about the rack space thing, when every single recorder was 2 RU or these big decks back in the day, now we're doing something that was the size of the smallest deck I've ever seen. We're doing 4 channels in that size, rather than 1 channel in a giant 6 RU height. box.
So this is enabling more multi-camera.
Yeah,
kind
so
of
I think
production.
we've started to see people being able to afford to add extra cameras. But we've also seen just a ton of flexibility since we have all of the conversion built into the box. It doesn't matter what your inputs are. If you're dealing with anything physical, we can basically get that in, record it, and you can even download all the files over the network at the end of the day.
Well, you're talking about how it makes it more affordable, so I'm wondering, are there areas of our media and entertainment industry that are now saying, hey, we can do more cameras that before couldn't?
Well, we've started to see that with some of our customers who are rental houses and places like that. Now they can they can rent a recorder that will do 4 channels, so now they have an opportunity to rent them extra cameras and the other ANSA equipment that they need.
That's interesting.
So we have really started to see a lot of things go from 2 or 3 cameras to 4 or 6 cameras pretty quickly, because what used to be 2 RUs for 2 channels, you now have 8 channels right there.
Right.
So the flexibility is really always a nice thing.
Well, and then the cameras themselves are less expensive, aren't
Yeah,
they?
a lot of cameras have come down in price, and there's a lot of great gear at this show to see and see this stuff working live.
Have you seen any implementations of it that took you by surprise? You know, we're talking about customers reinventing gear.
Well, I've seen a few interesting things. They'll take various little cameras. Like we had someone take one of our RovoCam, which is a little 4K block-style camera, and they were using it. This is not what we intended. We thought sports replay, all these types of productions. It's monitoring a nuclear facility.
Okay, then.
Like, wow, I wasn't expecting that one, but it works great.
Right.
We were thinking more baseball replay, but that'll work too.
Well, and I was thinking, religious production, church production is huge. I would think that they might find.
They've embraced multicam as switchers and things became less expensive and more empowering to the churches and the different groups. We've seen a lot of the level of production in a lot of these facilities is A level. I mean, it's incredible.
Absolutely.
Full broadcast facility type infrastructures, and so the same things that you've seen in high-end college sports and high school sports, where there's television dollars, you're starting to see people through web streaming generating the same kind of revenue and building out the same kinds of facilities.
That is really intriguing to me, because you do wonder if some of these over-the-top organizations are also going to find ways to use it, because they are, like you said, developing their own little studios.
Well, it's interesting because we develop a little product that's our Hilo. It's a webcast type encoder. Great little box for a church or a school or me or you, anyone who's got a show or something they want to get to Facebook or get to any of these live web CDNs. And I call it a webcast encoder, and everyone wants it to be a broadcast encoder. It looks good, it works good, it doesn't do everything that you would look for in a broadcast encoder, but there is this whole tier of production where that doesn't matter and they're fine with these things, and they make it work. But it's really interesting to see where some of the AV side of the ballgame has really changed production in the SMPTE side of the ballgame. Because we're all solving the same problems. We need to get something on a screen or something recorded and delivered to the customer. And they've adapted a lot of different home technologies into the professional space, whereas we bring professional technologies kind of into this, I don't want to call it prosumer, but this layer that's not Hollywood cinema production, but there's all the screens and all the devices that everyone's watching.
So it sounds like both sides really win in this.
Yeah.
Kind of exciting.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of live streaming content going on as well, so we're talking about that.
Yeah.
I mean, how is that impacting things?
Well, that's what we've seen in the last year and a half or so since we started shipping the Hilo encoder. We've seen all sorts of things. People using it in production to stream dailies, like inside the facility.
Right.
So, the director can watch it on his iPad or whatever. You don't have to go to the viewing room just to see a cut real quick. So they'll play it right out of an Avid system or an Adobe system or whatever. And then we've seen people that do all sorts of, town hall type meetings, these kinds of events where they're just streaming to various platforms. We've seen it's really been an interesting jump into new business opportunity for us. As,
Interesting.
A lot of these broadcast technologies and SDI is going to away at some point or being converted to IP and then different form factors. But we do still see a lot of people deploying them in small islands and then connecting those islands by IP or by other means.
Interesting. So it seems like, in a way, that it's a whole industry that is perfect for your product.
Yeah, it's great. As a converter company, we're always looking for things, so signals here, signals there, and it's tough since there's so many different things that people are using. But it's been great to see things like H.264. We all have been seeing H.264 for a decade, and it is a great standard for web delivery and other things. And I think it's going to be like composite video. It's never really going away. So we'll still be watching it at some point. There's so much archive material. There's so much stuff that's been put in that format. But it is cool to see things kind of all come together.
Very good. Another kind of a technology that we haven't talked about yet is higher frame rate. Talk a little bit about how that's impacting you.
Well, that one's been great because the most obvious applications for high frame rate, at least in broadcast, have always been sports. It looks better, especially with progressive frames, if you see everything happening instead of the football go jaggy or you're looking at the line. And some of the driving factor initially were replay officiating stuff to see is the ball in the hoop or at the time when the clock goes off or some of those types of things. But as we've seen the frame rates go up on the consumer sets, we can actually now watch some of that stuff at home. And I think it looks really cool in some applications, especially sports and anything that's outdoors. I think lends itself well to that.
Right.
Some material, we're so conditioned with the frame rates we see, the 2398s, the 2997s, the 60s, that sometimes it looks a little jarring. But once you kind of get used to it, it's just more information for your brain to process, but it can make the pictures so much smoother.
Well, and people are talking about, I mean, there have been a few people in our industry talking about variable frame rate as well, so that you might be able to dial it in like you can dial in so many other things.
Yeah. Well, and you see so many times where people are willing to completely compromise frame rate, like in streaming.
Right.
People, if it's just a keynote speech and it's, 15 frames a second is going to be just fine for a lot of things. If it's somebody, doing basketball in slow-mo dunking over a car, you're probably going to want to see 60 frames a second because that's going to look amazing.
So how does AJA figure into the delivery of all this frame rate?
Well,
frame rates?
we're pretty, beholden to the SMPTE standards since we're doing standards conversion through a lot of our products, and so we tend to kind of let SMPTE lead a little bit there. Sometimes you have to get out ahead of what they're doing if your customers are ready to buy it. But as we see the frame rates, and that's just like HDR, that's something that anyone can see the difference between 30 frame rates and 100, or 30 frames and 120.
Yes.
So that's one that really is a good thing. That it's tough, is you need the people at home to want it before you can really sell a lot of it, but you got to build it before people can make it to see it at home. So it's always fun to try to pick it right.
So do you think this is a very nascent field?
I think it's going to be a pretty big deal, and I think it's interesting because obviously UHD and 4K there's more pixels. It looks better than HD, but does that really matter in a lot of applications? That's always the question. And I think it does matter, especially in home cinema and regular production cinema. And it's starting to be cost-effective enough that people can do it for everything, and it looks great. But it had been, now the problems are kind of solved, but it had been really hard to deliver the content over the web or any way to customers. So.
Well, and it seems kind of crazy now. I mean, there's so much going on in terms of creating content for mobile devices, as I'm sure you've read about.
Yeah.
And then we have the huge screens, and then we have the immersive experiences. I mean, content is being created in so many different kinds of experiences. It seems like they might all have slightly different.
Well, and that's kind of what I actually had a couple conversations today about VR, HDR. Because obviously, if you're in an immersive type of environment visually, you want HDR. Like if you're walking around in a beautiful forest or whatever, you want to see that green. You want to see all the colors pop.
Right.
And I was like, hey man, what are the signals? Oh, they're these? Yeah, we can do that. It's just running the signals through the box. And what he's doing is actually going to be using a couple of our products that'll do the multi-channel HD. Because he has a bunch of HD feeds that are all the segments of his 360 video. So he's just using regular broadcast technology, but he's going to make his VR experience much more immersive.
It seems like one of the challenges of being an AJA is, as you mentioned earlier, 3D made a big splash and then kind of not entirely petered out, but became quite a bit less popular.
Yeah.
So now we've got higher frame rate, we have higher resolution, we have IP, we have higher frame rate, we have so much going on. Are they all going to be hits?
It's tough to tell because 4K really took off, and then I wouldn't say fell off, but semi-plateaued. Like we're all still adapting to it. We like it. It's great. But I don't know about all of them. I think they'll all have their applications. Like you see 3D became the whole world and then found its niches, and it is awesome for some things.
It is.
Truly awesome. But 4K, I think everything's going to continue to evolve on a frame size basis, but always want more pixels. But the practicality of that, and if you're watching it on a phone with one mono speaker anyway at 720p, does it really matter?
Right.
That's where it becomes a point of diminishing returns potentially for some of these. But I think the frame rate and HDR are going to run. I think we're going to have 4K around for quite a while.
So you feel that AJA has made the right bets on all these new technologies coming in?
I think so. I mean, we haven't done a ton of the above 60 hertz 4K stuff, but I think that's really going to be beautiful. Like the next Olympics, we're going to see a lot of this stuff on the broadcast side. Whereas in Japan, they're going to be broadcasting 8K. We're going to see a lot of things, and whether that works or learn from trying to do those things.
Okay, well, pleasure speaking with you. I hope
Definitely.
you enjoy the rest of your show.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was great, and I appreciate the time.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eric. Take care.